So leading from Henji's paper, so the visual audit loop, as she mentioned, the whole, it's recycling now. Go from start to finish. Um, Using the hospital data, which took payments and then all the transactions relevant to that expense versus all of the payments and some of the charity payments. It was easy to really identify what percentage was there, which was zero, right? Where each account became zero versus the ones that weren't. So just off the bat, I've never been an auditor, but I've done data, and it would be very easy to say, okay, we don't have to worry about those necessarily. Maybe we start here looking at these, and look at where the issues were. And so then you could actually see some of those accounts, I think. Yeah, there you go. And then you use that information. So that goal space goes in again to the next loop, which you would see here. Let me see. Sometimes it draws, sometimes it doesn't. I've seen this happen on the public Tableau, but there would be a big red dot here normally. So you would see that all of these are kind of within the the model or the regression that was run that said that, okay, these are normal, and then there should be a red dot here. I'm going to see if it comes up. Yeah, there it goes. Oh, perfect. So now you could say, okay, so here's my model. Everything's kind of along the regression. Oh my, let me go look at this one. So you could look at this account and you could see that here were the expenses, and then here were the payments and the charity payments. And you can see this is where there's a problem. So as an auditor or someone dealing with data, you can then say, okay, let's see what pattern was here and see if there was a break in process or something along those lines, which then you could pull another thread. Going along the next loop, you quickly would see, well, this leads to this. This is the account that had the problem. And then you could further see the evidence. It's up here. So it could even give you a better definition or explanation of what's going on, right? So that takes you, so those are the two visuals, takes you back to the control. We go back to the control test. Um, that's going to render. Okay, so then we go, so those were the loops that we discussed. Now if we go here, um, I I also found this very interesting because the you could see where most of the dots are falling within the regression, which could quickly give you an idea of why these may be something you want to start looking at, right? Uh, um, and how they're falling, the bad debts are falling kind of away from what the expectation is. Again, leading to auditors finding different understanding of where they should go look as opposed to looking at Henji, how many this was what millions of like 2 or 3 million or something like that. You're on mute.
Yeah, it was more than 1 million transaction.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, I mean, I guess the normal process, you take a sample and you check, but visually going through the model that was in the paper, you can quickly identify transactions that you would want to look at, and then you could actually look at um, what the discrepancy was and the account, and then you could actually use that. It using this to further what the paper is saying, which is you kind of explore, then you get your conformative, and then you go through the loops, and now you can actually use this as a way to audit and create work papers from the models, and then try to determine why so many, these accounts, the bad debts were considerably lower. So is the percentage wrong, or is there fraud? I mean, you never know. So it's very easy with visual to understand where these are. Um, and this is just a bigger breakout and gives you the um, all the statistical output from the regressions, right?
Yes.
I should go back there. One thing I don't know if you noticed, it said in the paper, but the p-values are all within 1%. So there's statistical significance, which is pretty amazing actually on that kind of data. And we try to go back. No, where's the? No. So we go back here. We can go to the final one, which goes back to here where we could actually look at the outliers again. So uh, going off the paper, you can see how following the loops can quickly identify and help you understand how to audit a large transactions. You go to other organizations, millions is nothing, but imagine doing this for 10 or 15 million at a larger organization. You could actually create the ability to review your your audit and your audit papers relatively quickly. Hanji, is there anything I didn't hit that you'd like me to present?
Uh, I can add some points. So this data set was the hospital accounting data. So we have this account table that summarize how much was charged and what is the ending balance of transaction related to this account. Accounts basically represent the hospital visit of the patient. So if you go to US hospital, you know that you got charged or you got bill, and often there's some delay between when you pay the full amount for this charge by the bill. And the problem is there's some delay, and also they have like a lot of bad debt to be recognized for the hospital in many cases. So it is important to make sure that all the transaction is properly followed and that all the total charge should be matched with the total transaction when the account is completed and closed. So we did some internal control testing here, try to see how much account has this discrepancy between the total charge and the total transaction amount. And the first loop found we have this discrepancy for the small amount of portion, around 0.15% of the sample. So 99% they're matching, but unfortunately there are some transactions that doesn't match. So we are wanting to look at why this is happening. So that's why we move on to the second loop here on the second one. So this time we didn't use the bar chart, but we used the scatter plot to see the relationship between the total transaction and the total charge. Not just simply comparing whether this matching or not matching, because if it's a minor difference, it's not material. But if there is a huge differences, then it might be material sometimes. So that's why we use the scatter plot. And you can see, as you see here, that we have a red dot way above the other scatter plot, and we found this is not normal. So we look into transaction. Actually, the difference was like just $1 million between the total total charge and the total transaction. So we first thought it might be just a digit errors. So to test that, like we move on to the next one, the third one. Um, but actually it wasn't digit error, even though it was a $1 million difference, but actually it wasn't digit errors. Actually, there is a transaction that is actually is 1 point something million dollar, but the total charge was 1 million off. So unfortunately, we didn't have a chance to go through further process because this one is obtained by the data provider. And we didn't have this one is anonymized and we didn't have access to the more further process. But if it's a real audit practice, auditor can ask question to the client why there's a discrepancy in this account. Sometimes they will give you explanation. If that explanation makes sense to you, then you will just move on to the other items. But if that is not what that is not justifiable, probably you will go through other process. You might take into the other transaction that is deviate as well. And if you find more cases like that, then it can be it can be flagged for the auditors. Maybe they have a material weakness in the internal control or deficiency in the internal control in terms of tracking those charges and transaction, and it can potentially lead to the errors, material errors in the financial statement. So the caveat here is we not just creating visualization, we not only create a visualization, but try to document those different detail we describe in the model. What was the objective? What was the whether it is the EDA or CDA, or whether what type of visual graphic we use, what was a data of interest, what was a var set. So often the problem or the some perception about the data visualization or visual analytics is this is a subjective and it's difficult to replicate. So we try to fix this problem about this replicability of this visualization, because by specifying what was the data we use and providing the var set and document the var set was used for this visualization, if somebody else coming to this data and try to perform the exact same thing, they will likely to achieve the same presentation of the visualization. And I think that's really important for the practice, because if without this kind of documentation and proper definition, uh, they might someone if they have this feeling about if someone else coming and have failed to create the same kind of visualization, probably I cannot explain it to them. So this visual audit model try to address this problem, these challenges in practice, how they can systematically document this in their audit paper. So that's why I know they are using this type of visualization in practice sometimes for their personal use or to personally understand what this data is telling about, but they're not so comfortable of using this as a formal audit paper or audit evidence because of these reasons. So that's the idea of this paper. We try to address this problem, how they can systematically document this and not just presentation, but actually facilitate this analytical process of the human analytical process of auditor, not only using their knowledge, but using the data to answer the question. So that was the idea, and I put the link to this interactive paper in the chat box. We create this interactive paper as a demonstration. So you can actually change the account number, for example. Right now, we have this work paper in the loop 3. We have this visual. We use this specific account ID to show what is this, what are the transactions related to this account. But you can actually type different account ID from this loop 2. For example, if you find something else from this scatter chart, because like if you exclude this one, right now this red circle is too big, so you might not be able to see the other ones. But if you exclude this exception, then you will get the different view. Now you will have a better view on the scatter chart. So you will find this another circle that actually deviate from the other transaction, the expected linear model. Then you can type this account ID to this bottom, and you can look at how this is look like. And so the interactive feature is beneficial for the auditor to facilitate this process of reasoning, not just presentation. So that was the idea here. And if you can explore this data, explore this dashboard from this link, and we have this operation guide in the very first page of this dashboard. So you can look into it to explore different features of this dashboard. And if you feel free to ask, send me email if you have any question about this paper or about this dashboard. We're happy to share insight.
Uh, are we able to ask a question right now on this?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So this is Jim Litley, and I spent a career in public accounting, and now I'm a part-time lecturer at Rutgers in the AIS department.
Mhm.
And I cover visual analytics in one of my courses. I find this topic to be very interesting, and my experience has been that we historically have used visual analytics around scoping. So either during the risk assessment process for planning and scoping, or within particular audits for planning and scoping. But one of the things that I found with Tableau that I've started to use as group projects in my courses is they have what's called accelerators. So these are
Mhm.
pre-built workbooks that have visualizations and dashboards, and they have um, an entire set that they've developed, although I haven't seen any yet related to audit. But they've got an entire set that they've developed with dummy data. And then they have clients, Tableau clients that have built their own. And it's pretty cool stuff. And the neat thing about it is it starts to now make that leap from kind of the higher level visualization for risk assessment and audit planning and scoping to kind of more detailed, if you think about it from an internal audit perspective or a regulatory compliance perspective, where you can now load your own data. You got to map it using their data mapper tool, but you load your own data to these accelerators. Um, and it really makes it a lot easier. And then what I have my students work on, and I'm not sure if you guys have used this, the data guide feature. Now, I don't know if data guide is available in Tableau Public, but it is available in Tableau Desktop. And to me, this data guide is a game changer because it really does, through their own artificial intelligence built into their platform, it identifies the outliers based on kind of AI. I don't know how it works, but it really does give a good start. So I would encourage you. I'm just wondering, have you guys looked into that, the accelerators and the use of data guide?
Not at the time, because like when we start working on this paper, those feature was not available in Tableau because we started like 2020. So we unfortunately we didn't have that discussion in this paper. But I think that you raise a really good point because the use of this visualization were more toward the early stage of audit, like understand the data and planning, but actually it has more potential than just understanding the data itself, but drilling down to the more detail what data is telling you about. So that's why we come up with this paper. I will look into those features as well. I think it's important to understand because but the problem, as you mentioned, the problem is we don't know why they're like giving that advice, right? I think the problem in practice sometimes they're not comfortable just saying, "Oh, Tableau suggests me to do," or the visual analytics tool suggests me to do. So that's why we thought there should be some kind of more way to address this in the audit work paper. And I guess that will be the important part. How we gonna incorporate like those new technologies such as LLM can be incorporated in the future, for example, in the Tableau or in the visualization. So how we gonna address this problem will be important. And also it's important to understand, I guess, these model can be good starting point to incorporate those large language model to, because like you can, for example, based on this model, you can specify the AI to create visualization you want. Like you just tell me, I want this data, I want this var set, create me great graphic.
Yeah,
Then
yeah, just
it,
a couple things on that. First, I mean, there's with any analytics engine you're going to use and audit, there's going to be judgment involved, right? So it's really just identifying potential areas of risk. You're still going to have to exercise judgment as to how, if and how you follow up. So that's number one. Number two, I think the powerful thing here, especially for the larger firms, I'm already seeing this now that they use both Tableau and Power BI. They will build their own, in my example, they'll build their own accelerators, right? And they'll
Yep.
know um, what's identified, why it's identified, and then it will be one additional piece of information that's considered by the auditor, right? It's not
Yep.
that we're blindly having an engine identify the areas or transactions for audit focus or scrutiny. So I think, as we move toward agentic AI and really starting to automate things like robotic process automation with agentic AI, so AI agents, I think the issue that you've just identified, auditors are going to have to get their arms around that, right? Because at the end of the day, I mean, I've been dealing with continuous auditing for 20 plus years. That's always been the issue is, how do you know that's the right thing to do? But when we do things manually, it's the same thing, right? We look at which manual journal entries did we select? Why did we select them? um, Unusual, large and unusual, as the regulations read, is a pretty broad scope, right? Large and unusual. What's large? What's unusual? So, anyway, I just want to alert you and wonder if you guys have looked at these accelerators and data guide. Again, I'm not positive that data guide is available in Tableau public, but I know, I have an educator account and I get my students the student accounts, and they use Tableau Desktop, and Data Guide is in there. And they also have access to all the accelerators through the Tableau Data Exchange.
Yep, yep, definitely we'll look into it. Yep. Thank you for the suggestion.
Sure. And then do you plan to, last week I attended, I thought it was awesome that the presenters included their presentations in the chat. So do you plan to include, I appreciate the link to Tableau. I've copied, I've saved that. Do you plan to include your paper and or your slides in the chat today?
Sure, I can share
Mind?
my slide. Sure, I can.
Yeah, I
Mm,
think that's hugely valuable for
mm,
these sessions when the
mm.
presenters include, if it's a paper and or a slide deck, I just find it very valuable.
Yeah, sure, I'll share my slides.
Thank you.
Um, Hi, EJ. I also have one question that I wanted to ask.
Mhm,
So basically, Figure 9 mostly talks about audit evidence, right? How can this be used as part of the audit evidence? Um,
mhm.
yeah, so how can we actually map? So we know that audit evidence has mainly three components: sufficiency, reliable, and relevance, right? So how do you think we can actually map your findings to each of those pillars, whether sufficiency, relevance, or reliability, when it comes to the findings from your visual analytics?
I think those components should be tested individually, as you mentioned. In this conceptual model, we didn't test this individual components specifically, but I think it's important to link those components, like how we can say this tested completeness or and what is the best way to what are the components to be used to test completeness tests for specific audit task. These should be tested individually to provide a more specific guideline. So this is more like conceptual model. It's more like a starting point. I guess like this should be advanced more to provide the actual practical guide to the users. But we're trying to achieve those in the future. In this model, we are more focusing on discussing the concept that should be discussed in the visual analytics. But definitely, we have to incorporate those the context in the context of audit.
Perfect. And one more follow-up question. So I know you talked about the task technology fit theory within your
Mhm.
manuscript, right? So mostly the discussions were made about the goal of such visual analytics. But what do you think, based on the technology fit, what type of tasks do you think are more suitable for such visual analytics? And what's the, let's say, the competitive advantage than using others with respect, for example, to one specific audit task?
Um, as we show, we thought that internal control testing can be a good area for us to perform this visual analytics test because in theory, if internal control taken place properly as designed, especially not only the design but the operation side, like whether this internal control is actually executed as designed. So in that case, we have to look at a large volume of data, and is they can take some sample, obviously, but taking sample might not be the best practice to test the internal control, considering how much volume of the data is produced in everyday in business. So we believe this visual analytics can be really powerful tool for those internal control testing because they can basically start with the whole population that has to comply with this internal control policy. If they find something that doesn't comply with the policy, then they can drill down whether this is just a mere exception that this can be justified by the explanation by the client, or this actually required, or it might be the efficiency of the internal control design. So it can be both true. Sometimes it has to be worked that way to make operation work because at the end of the day, the goal of internal control is not only providing the reliable financial information, but to support operation. So yeah, I think the visual analytics can have a really powerful can be really powerful tool to test that because you can start with the full population and drill down as gradually having a smaller instance, smaller bar set to find the actual instance that potentially linked to the deficiency or weakness of the client's internal control. So that's why we test this in this demonstration as well. Also, there might be some estimation that sometimes the client make a estimation on certain type, like, or they might projection on those some of the account estimate, and they will use some kind of formula to calculate those numbers or get a certain estimate. So I think visualization can be good for those exercise too, because if they have a systematic formula, then there should be some pattern can be described in the model, and we can use visualization to visually present those model in the relationship between the actual amount and the estimation. If there's a deviation between the actual and the estimation, and if that is not explained well by the client, then probably that can be another flag on there might be some risk of errors or risk of fraud related to this transaction.
Thank you very much.
Just one other point as a follow-up on that. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with Solona's process mining platform.
Yep.
And so one of the things that I think, obviously, from an internal perspective, there's, performance auditing that you can look at to identify deviations in the client or the company's procedures that may, if corrected, result in a financial benefit, reduced costs, greater revenues, etc. But from an audit perspective, a financial statement audit perspective, in particular, as we look at automated controls or hybrid automated and manual controls, um, I've seen, some of the exercises because I also use that in my course, and they're visual diagrams, those spaghetti charts as they call them, that identify the deviations around, standard operating procedures or control avoidance is pretty powerful, right? And if you think about it, their software needs basically three elements at a minimum: case ID, activity, and timestamp. And so that's another area, right? As we're talking
Mhm.
about looking at visual analytics around perhaps deviations around the control process, standard operating procedures, et cetera, that will identify those particular variances. That also, again, as we're thinking at a higher audit scoping perspective, let's say you're doing an audit around accounts payable, you can look and see those deviations at a high level to say, I need to focus on these particular areas or these particular transaction types. And maybe you select, using some sampling method, you select some, or on individual transaction testing. So that's at the audit scoping planning stage. Individual transaction testing, when you look at historical data, it will identify those transactions that fell outside that control environment. So, I'm a huge, I think Power BI is a great tool. I'm a little challenged with, I don't think I don't think that Microsoft does a very good job of creating um, learning assets. You can go find things on YouTube or you can learn yourself. Tableau's got pretty robust learning assets. Salonis has pretty good learning assets. But I think this concept of visual analytics, there are lots of software tools and types of tools that can really yield, I think, very powerful visualizations that can aid the auditor. And so I don't know where you guys stand with something like a process mining approach to this, right? Using something like Salonis. But again, as you guys are thinking about additional research, I would encourage you to consider it because I think,
Yeah.
something as simple as that can be very, very powerful in those two areas. Like I said, maybe not the broader annual risk assessment for the audit, but for individual audit scoping at a high level before you actually go into your substantive testing, or when you're actually doing your testing, I think some of these tools can be very powerful.
Yep, definitely. Process mining is really powerful. I personally use for my teaching case as well. Um, I guess that flow chart or the spaghetti chart I think is a good starting point. And also it's incorporating the visual analytics on the process mining will be really awesome. Like if we can link that into the process mining into the visual analytics, I think it will be much more powerful. Visual analytics itself is really powerful. The process mining itself can provide a lot of information, but I guess we incorporating those technology will be much more provide much more idea or much more knowledge to the auditors.
Yeah, and then uh, again, I think as we think about kind of repeatable and sustainable continuous auditing,
Mhm.
I think a lot of these leading practice low code, no code tools are going to work very well together, especially with agentic AI, where you can have, say, UiPath pull data down, you could have Alteryx transform it, clean it, analyze it, you could output the data into, say, something like Tableau, all being controlled essentially by, an AI agent that helps that auditor every month, say on a large audit, or every quarter or annually each year for a smaller client. I think as these technologies continue to mature, they fit together. I think the future is bright. Again, having talked about continuous auditing and monitoring for the previous 20 years, I really didn't see a cost-effective way to do it. But now what's happening with some of these software tools, I actually can see an end in sight.
Yep, definitely.
EJ, do you,
Mhm.
I don't know what the progression, but Jim brings up a good point in being an industry, not that I'm an accounting, but do you see the next progression of this paper being training a specific model in a very specific task? Because you gotta put a ring fence around it. But similar to what Jim was saying, do you foresee training a model to pick out charity payments that don't match or something like that? And you could train a model fairly simple to do that. Would that be the next progression of this paper, or?
Yeah, I think that will be the next step. I guess like we can test like a set like more smaller pieces because like audit is really complicated
Yeah,
task
yeah,
as
yeah.
you know is like it's really it depends on the business, it depends on the client, it depends on
Hmm.
what what the process is. I guess like looking into the those smaller pieces will be interesting, and I'm hoping we can do that in the more smaller pieces to provide more systematic guidance to
Yeah,
the actual practice. So the problem, I see the question about whether regulator accept this visual audit as audit evidence. Um, it's yes and no, I would say. It's not like the ADA or the AICP or FASB doesn't stop or PCAOB doesn't stop auditor to use visual analytics in their practice, but there is no uh, practical regulation or practical statement or there's no rule that specify this should be used this way or this should be used that way. So that's why we thought it is necessary to talk about this concept and what are the terms that relate to this concept so we can build some better standard on how we incorporate this technology in the audit process. So that's the one of the goal of this paper. Um, we are hoping we have more standard or more description on explanation on how this visualization should be used in the audit process. But I don't think for it's not like they're not saying you shouldn't use the visualization in your audit process, but it's not like there is a certain portion that describe, oh, you can use visual audit in your audit process.
Yeah, one more
But
point to add, yeah, about the standard. I think the main problem of the standard is that the standard still requires the traditional method to perform. For example, like the current audit standard still mention sampling, while we have the way to do the full population testing. So sometimes the auditor has to follow the standard. And yeah, finally, they don't have like, let's say, enough resources to like use the audit data analytics. Yeah, and this one can be one of the reasons why the ADA is not widely adopted by the auditor, or if it is, it just adopted in a preliminary stage.
yep.
And I think the PCAOB has had a long history of, in my opinion, um, having worked through audit and forensic in the audit. Um, they're they haven't been as progressive as maybe they could be, and I think that is a challenge because at the end of the day, the firms are not going to do things that they're not going to get credit for, or they're going to have to do additional things because the PCAOB may not accept that on its own, unless two things. Number one, it reduces their risk, right? So it's more effective in terms of identifying issues that could prevent audit failures in the future. So I think they will embrace it if it does that, regardless of what the PCAOB says. And they'll recognize that they have to do the other things that the PCAOB requires. Or if the clients somehow pay for it or are pushing back. And so it's interesting. I mean, I just presented to the at Rutgers. It was a faculty as well as external business, which was mostly accounting firms, and did some research on it's literally the top 6 auditing firms are spending billions of dollars on AI, right? And, all of the technologies are going into these stacks. So visual analytics tools like we've been talking about, process mining, RPA tools, as well as AI, agentic AI, et cetera. And so they're spending billions for a reason, right? Well, now their
Mhm.
clients are saying, well, listen, you're spending billions on AI to make your audits more efficient, right? Lower cost, even though a big portion of this is also effectiveness of the audit. And their clients are saying, we want a discount on our fees. So I
Yeah,
think there is going to become an issue
yeah.
where these audit firms are going to say, wait a minute, we can't give a discount to our audit clients to use this technology that'll make our audits more efficient and then have the regulator come back and say, no, 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 we won't accept that. You have to do all this other stuff, right? So I do think that, this issue that we're talking about here in terms of regulator acceptance and prevalence of use, it is going to reach, I think, uh, I don't want to say a loggerhead, but or a conflict, but it is going to become a decision point. It's going to have to be figured out because at the end of the day, the firms are not going to invest billions of dollars if it doesn't lower the risk, improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the audit. So if the clients only care about the efficiency because of fees, and the PCAOB disregards the use of newer technology from an audit effectiveness perspective, the firms aren't going to continue to spend this kind of money, right? So it's an exciting time, but my experience has been the PCAOB kind of lags in this area of technology. And I'm sure if you guys have worked with them, done any research in this area, you would probably see that as well.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree that so there's some difficult issue. So hopefully we can PCO we can adopt some of this change, and we can hopefully this investment in the audit technology can actually help us to get a better audit quality, and also this is not just the cost, decreasing the cost, but actually provide better information, the financial information to the users, and ultimately provide better having better finance report. So that's what we are hoping.